I studied English. I studied, what I really studied was directing plays and chasing girls, which I did both of those with kind of moderate success, and officially I studied English, yeah. I think that probably I should have gone and trained done a vocational year's training as a director when I left, and in fact I teach directing quite a lot, and I talk about that. But I think a director does need to be able to read a play, and a director does need to be able to understand the cultural, social, political context of a play like this, and feel reasonably confident in being able to get hold of the background material and understand the play. And I think an English degree is a start for that. It's certainly not the end. No. And I've never have done so. It's funny, my brother is a very successful film and television director, and I've never directed TV. I think it's a very, very different art. I suspect that acting, TV and theatre are closely related, but I think I see drama, if you like that, whereas I think that to direct television you have to be interested in kind of getting in there and poking your nose in a different way that I don't see like that. I don't look like that. My career, I think, has probably got maybe 3 or 4 phases. First of all, I worked doing almost entirely new plays at the Traverse in Edinburgh. Worked with a lot of famous people in those days. In fact, weirdly, I have over the years worked with a lot of people who've become very famous, and I worked with them before they were. In the 80s, I was at the Traverse doing new writing. Then in the end of the 80s into the early 90s, I was a freelance director, started doing opera. In 1993, I set up a company called English Touring Theatre, which I ran for 15 years, which, as the name implies, tours all over the place. Doing other things as well, the Royal Court, the National, bits and pieces all over the place. And then in 2008 to 2014, I ran the Rose Theatre in Kingston. But all the time while I was doing those artistic directorships, I was doing other bits and pieces. And I've written a lot of books, which I love doing and care about. There is no such thing as a career for a theatre director. I tried to explain this to my dad. It's not that you start and then you just go straight up an escalator. You follow a weird path. But then the strange thing is when you look back, you can see a pattern, but it's not clear at the time at all. Well, I think you understand some of the pressures that producers are under, which I certainly do. I think that it makes you very practical, and I think I am quite practical, and I care about that. I know that we've only got limited time. I know we've only got limited resources because I've sat in budget meetings, so I understand what can be bought, what can't be bought, if you see what I mean. So I'm pretty pragmatic. There's a funny thing is that I think probably every play I've directed for the last 30 years, I've had 4 weeks rehearsal. And it's like a body clock now. I know exactly where we need to be on the second Wednesday or whatever we are today. I think we're on the second Wednesday. And it's very odd. It just is an absolute rhythm. And they're all, every play is different with different demands, but you have to be in that. That's one of the things that experience does teach you. I used to go and see plays. My parents would take me to the theatre a bit. I wanted to be a painter, actually. That's what I really wanted to be, was a fine artist when I was a teenager. And sort of a funny moment when I suddenly realised that I was actually really, really interested in literature and in words, which is really important for me. And the two sort of came together, and then I suddenly realised that I was never going to be Picasso. And I got a place at art school at the same time as I got a place at university. And I just I needed to prove to myself that I could go to art school in order not to go to art school, if you see what I mean, psychologically. So I still, strangely, as a theatre director, I still do think rather visually, although I don't think my reputation is as a visual director. But I do look at groupings with a kind of painterly, I think a bit of a painterly sense. I love painting. I love looking at paintings, and I might do some more of it one day. But there are a handful of people who I've hugely admire. Some international figures. Peter Stein, I think, they're all called Peter. Peter Stein is a genius. Peter Gill, I very, very much rate as a great British director. And there are other people as well who I've admired and who I continue to admire. You have to work it out for yourself. You have to work out who you are. You can't pretend. Well, I wrote a book about it. I wrote a book called So You Want to Be a Theatre Director, which gives all the advice. And so buy the book is the first piece of advice. What is the advice? See everything you can, read everything you can, meet everybody you can. I always say be promiscuous, and I mean artistically, you understand. Expose yourself to as many contradictory things as you possibly can, and through that, you'll start to find out who you are and what you want to be. I'm very aware that a lot of people find reading plays hard, and it's a peculiar discipline, and I try to put down what to be aware of, if you like. How plays work is different than how a novel works. And being able to read a play, that's the sort of thing I think a director needs to be able to do, is be able to read a play and hear dialogue for what it says about the character and the world and the class and who the people are, just from a few lines of dialogue. I think that's a skill that actors have to develop as well. Well, I think the most significant reason for doing The View from the Bridge now is that it is a great, great tragedy which has got in it this peculiarly contemporary issue, which is immigration. Well, I want to do the whole play. I don't believe in kind of saying, right, we're going to do it about one thing or another. The single most important thing, I think, is that you've got to feel the conditions of life in which these people are living, because you can only understand their behaviour if you understand the conditions. And I like to avoid what was memorably called the icy wastelands of abstraction. I think the world is made up of stuff and of people in a real world. You can only understand Eddie Carbone if you understand what 0 hours contracts are, if you understand what his working life is like, if you understand what the pressures of that is, if you understand the way that he may be an Italian-American, but he's a million miles away from what his grandparents came from, or what the two visitors are coming from, which is southern Italy poverty. The very fascinating thing here is that these people are living in real poverty in Brooklyn in the 40s, early 50s. And in it they are very, very poor. But by the standards of people who are living in southern Italy at the time, they're millionaires. And so, this is a fascinating issue that poverty is a relative phenomenon. And trying to catch that so that when the immigrants arrive, they think they're living they think it's a palace. And we and they, the family, know that they're living in something which is really not palatial lives at all. And that's brilliant realistic writing. That's really understanding the conditions of life and how that affects behaviour. Eddie Carbone adores his niece, who he's adopted and lives with. She falls in love with an immigrant, an illegal immigrant. And he finds this deeply impossible. The young man is extremely attractive, extremely charismatic, has a freedom and a spirit which Eddie finds impossible. And it all goes horribly wrong in the end. Well, the title is really important. It's quite often misunderstood, as if A View from the Bridge is a view of the bridge. It's not a view of Brooklyn Bridge, it's a view from Brooklyn Bridge down onto the poverty of an industrial, it's not quite a wasteland, it's people living on top of each other by the docks. It's sometimes thought that it must be a view of Manhattan from Brooklyn Bridge. There is no glamour about their world, it's the absolute opposite. Although they're not very far from Manhattan, they are in so many ways could be in another continent. This is a very interesting question, and I'm going to be very honest. I'd read the play before, years ago, and I'd seen it. I think I've seen it maybe a couple of times in my life. And when they asked me, I read it. Before I said yes, I thought I'd better read it through. And I said yes. And then for a design meeting, I kind of skim-read it. And when we were casting, I'd be reading little sections. And I think the honest truth is, and I'd worked out what the basic geography of it all is, and the honest truth is, and I will admit this, but I think I'm able to do this because I've done so many plays, so I don't advise this for people starting out. I don't think I read it that often. I remember reading it again before we started. I thought, shit, I better just really get my brain around it. Because I've been very busy doing a whole load of other things. But my advice would be to a young director is read it a lot. Don't do what I do. Yeah, I did more research of the world of it than I did reading the play. I mean, the internet is fantastic, and I found out, Red Hook, Brooklyn, which is where it's set. Where is that? I looked at it on the map. I've been to New York, but I've never been to Red Hook. What did that mean? What is Miller's? Miller says it is set in a particular place. That's not random. What does that mean? I did some research into 1940s Italy. What are they escaping from? The immigrants. What is the poverty of the 1940s? What is the poverty of the world that these guys are living in? I mean, one of the things that becomes very clear is that they're on, 0-hours contracts in modern terms. They have no job security. And trying to get a sense of what that life is, when the girl says, I'll go out and buy a rug when she's got a job, they don't have a rug, they don't have any carpets, they have bare wooden floors. I wanted to get a sense of what do they eat. You can't just caricature it and go, because there is a scene of dinner, It is pasta, but how much? How do you get that to feel real? I did quite a lot of looking on the internet at film of other productions, getting a sense of what I liked and what I didn't like and what I thought they'd got right, what I thought they got wrong. Looking at photographs of the Italian community in New York at the time. It's that sort of research, which is just the imaginative stuff, which makes you begin to get a sense of who they are and what Miller's intentions are in setting it there. Because my job as a director is Arthur Miller is now dead, but there would be no greater pleasure for me than Arthur Miller to watch it and say, that's my play. Well, look, casting varies through the age brackets, if I'm honest. So, Michael Brandon, who's playing Alfieri, he didn't audition. I took him out for lunch, and I asked him to do it. Terry Bannum, who's playing the wife, who I've known forever, I was working with a casting director, and I say, how can we get Terry Bannum to play it, kind of thing, because she's so marvellous, and so you're very lucky to get her. When you're dealing with the younger ones, who I don't know the kids straight out of drama school, casting director got in a lot of people. I don't do, and I don't think anybody does, formal auditions. I do meetings, and I find out who these people are, and we do a reading, and we read it, and then I direct it a little bit, and then we read it again. But I think, for example, Daisy, who's completely marvellous, who's playing Catherine, I think I got her back 3 times. She thinks she was surprised that she thought she hadn't got it, I got her back 3 times, just for a little 20 minutes, just to go through it again. And you've got to, casting is such a big part of the job, and if you miscast it, which I have done in the past, if you miscast it, you can never save it. And if you cast it right, your job is a lot easier. My approach to rehearsals is, and I think this is partly just having done it so much, and as I say, 4 weeks, we read the play for the first 3 days. We just read it and read it and read it. And we asked questions. What's happening here? What's his problem? What's her problem? What is the world of it? Building up that sort of strange mixture of what are the facts that you can understand in the play, and then imaginatively what is the world, making sure that the dialects are right, making sure that everybody's in the groove of it, understanding how it's written. And then in the second week, I do what I'm doing now, is I do what's called kind of sketch blocking, where we go through the whole play. I get it up on its feet, and we've got the furniture around and the kitchen and everything. But I don't. It's not sort of rigid. It's deliberately fluid and open, so that then the third week I then tidy it all up and make it really happen. So then the fourth week you can just run and run and run and run, because that's what you really want to get. You want to get to a position where you can run it a lot in the rehearsal room before you put it on the stage. What is it like for Marco and Rodolfo entering into that house for the very first time? What does that feel like, to have come across the ocean from the poverty of southern Italy and arriving in the house? And Rodolfo says, this is the very first house I'll have walked into in America. And it's a moment which summarises the whole immigrant experience very beautifully. There's one very good moment. There's a marvellous moment when when Beatrice, the wife, basically asks her husband, why aren't they having sex anymore? It's extraordinary, why are you neglecting me? Such a powerfully truthful moment. The family eat a meal together at the beginning, and students should think, what is the commune? They cross themselves before they start to eat. What does a meal mean for a family, for a small family who've poverty-stricken and the guys come back from work? What is that moment of shared communion, if you like? And the reason why that matters is because that's the last moment that you see the family together, properly together, before it's all fractured. And of course they're the great moments of Marco, the fight at the end and so on. But some of these things that's where the deep psychological truths are. When Marco asks, how much money can you earn here? And he's told. And he just can't believe that it's possible to earn so much money. And he's just told us about his kid back in Sicily who's got tuberculosis. And he's kind of in tears because he is here to earn money to send back to his family. And that's what the the Romanians and the Bulgarians and all the rest of them are doing here. They're trying to work out how to look after their families who are in poverty. And that just makes me go, that's really powerful.